Good afternoon again, everyone. We're so glad to have you back at the Paul Harrell radio program. This is State Representative Dan Sullivan filling in for Paul while he takes a few days off. Again, I appreciate you being here, and I think we have on the line State Representative John Payton. John, are you there?
Yeah, good afternoon, Dan. How you doing today?
Well, listen, I appreciate you joining me and helping bail me out here a little bit.
Well, I think it's great that you got to host the radio program today. I came to work this morning, had no idea what you were up to, and I've got a real job, and found a newspaper clipping laying on my desk. One of my employees had left it there, and it's a newspaper clipping from the Jonesboro Sun, letter to the editor by Senator John Cooper, who I like and who I supported in his first run to be senator. But anyway, so I texted you a picture of it and to see if you were aware of it, and you invited me to be on the radio show. So
yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm very aware of it, and that was
opportunistic.
Was going to make that a part of the radio show today. When it comes to the health care debate and funding, John, the liberals and many of the Democrats have always come with this throw granny off the cliff style. And, it's really surprising to me that we have Republicans turning to that tactic. You'll notice in that article, which was in the Jonesboro Sun, I think, a week or so ago, that's kind of the tactic or the strategy this article took, is that we fellow Republicans are going to be throwing granny off the cliff. Again, it's not a new tactic, but it's a new tactic that I'm hearing Republicans use against fellow Republicans. And John, I know you and I know those of us that have not supported Arkansas Works or the private option or Obamacare in any form or fashion. We all support taking care of the people that are most needy. In fact, what Arkansas Works has done and Obamacare has done is pull money away from the people that are most needy and use state tax dollars and federal tax dollars to pay for people's insurance who are healthy, young, working, able-bodied parents without kids. But John, you brought up another point to me. You talked about this point that Senator Cooper makes in the article that those of us on the right wing, I didn't know I was a right-winger, but now I guess I am now, labeled wear that label proudly. But you brought up a constitutional issue to me that I thought I agree with and really appreciate your ability to articulate that. Go ahead.
Well, when I read the article, I was concerned about a couple of things, but there's the health care debate and, what's right or wrong and how we balance that with our responsibility to the tax-paying citizens versus the needy citizens. And we've had, I got elected, I started my first term in 2013 when the private option was the big deal, and we had that fight. But, all that concerns me, and of course the 80,000 that they're now removing from the rolls that we find out have been fraudulently on the rolls for the last 4 years. But what bothers me more is the thing that seems to infect a lot of legislators' thinking, in that everything should be decided by a simple majority. The Arkansas Constitution, has a provision that if we're going to spend the taxpayers' money, that we have to have a supermajority in agreement on how to spend that money. And that's not something that we as legislators have the power to change. I mean, that's a vote of the people. It would take a constitutional amendment to change that. But they have found a way around it. And what I read in this letter to the editor is that Senator Cooper seems to support getting around the supermajority. Anything that we do down there is policy. And, of course, to pass a bill and to change a law that does not affect money, it just takes a simple majority. And he seems to make the argument in his letter to the editor that, if you're in a minority, which would be 49 or less, that you should not be dictating anything that has to do with policy. And he seems to make the leap that would include the funding. And so the misconception that so many people have is that we have to defund an entire agency or shut down government because we're having an argument over a particular policy. But that decision is made by the simple majority to tie the controversial issue to the entire budget, so that instead of just voting on one particular issue, that the minority who are trying to make sure it takes a supermajority to pass the funding, they have no choice but to vote on an entire budget or an entire agency's budget. We were promised in 2013, when the private option was coming through, that they would separate it from the DHS budget and that we'd have a separate vote on it. And they actually got a few people to vote for the policy by promising them that they'd have the opportunity to vote against the funding, the appropriation. And so I've witnessed that. I've been there now for 5 years, and it's just disingenuous to try to argue that we should back everything down to a simple majority when the Arkansas Constitution, which we do not have the power as legislators to change, calls for a supermajority when you're spending the taxpayers' money. If we have an item that we can't agree on, there's no reason to shut down an agency or to shut down the government. That decision's made by the majority that are not willing to get the extra votes it takes to spend money.
John, we kind of face this same issue with the veterans tax and the veterans tax cut. When it was coupled with a tax increase, and we couldn't separate those, weren't allowed to separate those, and many of us wanted to separate them because many of us favored a tax cut for the veterans, but we didn't favor a tax increase on the other side of that. But we weren't allowed to separate the two. They were pushed together, and we were forced to vote up or down on that. I don't remember how you voted on it, but I just didn't vote for it. I don't like the tactic. I don't like the style. And it seems like we're in the same position right now, again, that we disagree on Obamacare going forward, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this, or I'm going to on the show as the show progresses. But we're being forced into a corner, and it looks like Senator Cooper and others are trying to set the narrative that those of us who oppose Obamacare want to shut down DHS, and it's just not the case.
Well, the Constitution of Arkansas says that if you have 25 members in the House, that would be 25%, who agree that something should not be spent. We should not be spending our money on something like this. That the Arkansas Constitution says that we should put the brakes on and that we should come up with a policy that enough people can agree on to fund it. And but what they've done, and this is not just a private option thing. Like you said, it could be the veterans tax cut and other things. Well, what they've done is they found that we can't void what's in the Constitution, but we can avoid it by making these arguments. And so if you have 51 votes, you can pass a law and you can pass a policy that dictates that we're going to spend money. But the same 51 votes will also keep you from separating that item out from the agency budget or from the state budget when we vote on the whole budget together. And it's sad that they're using this tactic, because every dollar that we spend that's hard-earned by the taxpayers of Arkansas, it should require the supermajority that our Constitution intends for it to.
John, I appreciate you coming on. We're getting ready to go to a hard break. Thank you for your wisdom. I appreciate your friendship, the knowledge that you have of the Arkansas Constitution, Arkansas law, and the knowledge you have of the people of Arkansas. Maybe we can get some language in this funding that will limit. I think Josh Miller had a bill trying to limit enrollment or cap enrollment. Maybe we'll have an opportunity to bring that up and we can get that moved through. Thanks again, Representative Payton, and we'll see everybody back on the other side.
Stuck in his